At the lower levels, when you see the move e4, it's very natural to respond with e5. This is the most common way to start a chess game ever. Out of 6 billion games in the Lichess database, 1.4 billion of them start exactly like this. But I'm going to tell you a fact that may sound crazy. Out of those 1.4 billion games that start exactly like this, white wins 51% of the time, while black only wins 45% of the time. That is a ridiculous difference. But why? Why is this the case? When you play e5, white has so many ways to continue. They could play knight f3. They could play knight c3. They could play bishop c4. They could go with one of these queen attacks. They could play the king's gambit. They could play d4. There's so many openings, and you can lose in the early game so easily. Here's an example: knight f3, knight c6, bishop c5, knight f6. These are very common moves. Now, what if people play knight d5? This is called the fried liver. A lot of people don't know how to deal with it. In fact, the pretty much only way to win is to play d5, which is just losing a pawn. In the early levels, people just don't know this. You could also play bishop c5, which is a trap. But a lot of people don't know this. They think there's no way to stop this. And you can just lose immediately. That's why it's very dangerous to play e5. There's so many ways white can just take control. So why should you play the Caro-Kann? You see, the Caro-Kann is way simpler. And when you play the Caro-Kann, you limit white to just a few options. For example, once you play this move c6, you are limiting them to playing d4, knight c3, c4, and knight f3. These are like the only few moves that people play. Everything else is bad. And it's a very simple opening with a simple concept. And once you take control of the game by playing an opening like this, which you have studied and your opponent has not, you are more likely to win. Out of all games that start exactly like this, e4, c6, black wins more. Black wins 48% of the time, while white wins 47% of the time. It works. The Caro-Kann is a very good opening. Okay, cool. But what do you do in the Caro-Kann? Why do you play this move, c6? The point of c6 is you will play d5 the next move. You are trying to fight for the center. And it really doesn't matter what they play next. Most people will play d4. You will play d5. You will fight for the center like this. If they take, you take. Very simple opening. So, e4, c6. Most people will play d4, just taking control of the center. They might play knight f3 too, but we're just going to look at d4 for now. Okay, d4. What do you do next? d5. No matter the situation, you will probably play d5 99% of the time. In this situation, white has three main responses: push, which is called the advanced variation; take, which is called the exchange variation; or defend with knight c3. Let's look at each one by one. So why would your opponent play e5? The point of e5 is to create this wedge of pawns that will support each other. And you are stopping natural development. You are stopping a move like knight f6. It's a very logical move. So what should you do against this? Most advanced folk will tell you to play the move bishop f5. This is called the classical. The main point is just develop the bishop, play e6, develop normally. But this has a lot of theory. You can go wrong very easily if you don't know it. For example, what if your opponent plays h4? This move looks very strange. It's called the Tal variation. If you continue as normal, you have lost the game already. Why? g4, say bishop g6, h5, bishop e4, f3, you have lost your bishop. Your bishop cannot escape. You are down 3 points of material. That's why I wouldn't recommend you to learn this variation right now. Instead, you play this. C5. What is the point of C5? Well, C5, you directly strike at the center. You are immediately forcing white to make a decision. Yes, that looks like you have just lost a pawn. But now that these two pawns are separated, you can very easily attack both of them, and in some cases, win both of them. If your opponent does take this, you will play knight c6 to attack this. The moment you see that this knight comes out to defend, you will pin it to the queen. Now it cannot move. If it moves, you will take the queen. If they decide to attack your bishop, this is a waste of time. You can just take it. They can recapture. You will play e6 first, attacking both of these pawns, and you will either end up winning one or two. If they block it, it's very simple. You just take, bishop takes, e6. Let's look at the other variations. What if they don't take? What if they decide to defend with a move like c3? Simply, if you take now, they can take back. They have this wedge of pawns again, which is good for them. We'll just do the same thing. You'll play knight c6. They will probably defend. You will pin that knight again. Okay, take this position, which is the most common position you'll get. Let's say they just decide to do this. You will take blah, blah, blah. e6. They decide to castle. Now what? Your knight cannot go to f6 because of this pawn. So instead, it will go to e7, then f5. Your knight is really good on f5. And in all positions, you will look to get this. That's why this opening is so good. It's simple. You could click off this video right now. You now know how the Caro-Kann works. You know the basics. However, there are still a lot of things that you should study if you want to become one of the best Caro-Kann players. Now I'm going to show you how easily you can get into a winning position with this opening. We're going to start off with how most games start. This is the most common sequence. I have showed you this before. You will pin the knight. Most people will play bishop e2 to unpin. Now, you can actually hold on taking this knight. You will take their knight once you get attacked. For now, you can play a move like e6, just making sure this pawn is protected. Now, most people will end up castling. Now, again, you want your knight to be on f5. You'll play e7 first. Let's say they just attack your bishop now. This is a mistake because this doesn't do anything. You're going to do this anyway. Now, we'll take this pawn, then play f5, knight f5. You are now attacking this pawn twice. If this pawn falls, then this pawn will fall too. What if they defend? You can now bring in the queen. This move is also very important in the Caro-Kann. A lot of times, if you see this bishop move, or even if it doesn't move, you'll play queen b6 to target this pawn and this pawn. This is a very important move. Most people will play something like this. These are all just examples. Now, you can just win that pawn. That pawn may be falling soon. You could just be in a winning position this early on. We're going to look more in depth now. We're going to look at all the variations. What if they take? What if they just take? You just have such a simple game plan. You take and you play chess. You develop. Maybe you pin knights. Maybe you take. Maybe you just play the game normally, as you would. You've gone out of the opening unscathed, and you're in a decent position. There's also a few other variations, something like the pan-off. where white just lunges at you, trying to attack at this pawn. This is kind of like a queen's gambit. The other variation is after d5 to defend. You will just take. Simple. The knight will retake. Now you have a few options. There are a few things you could play. You could play bishop f5 attacking the knight. You could play knight f6 directly attacking the knight. You could play something called the Karpov, where you play this first and then attack with your knight. You could even play something like g6. There's a lot. I just recommend playing something like bishop f5. It's very simple. The knight will probably go to g3. You will back up. If you ever see the move h4, trying to maybe trap your bishop, just play h6, create this little space for your bishop, and you are in a very normal position. You will develop accordingly. You will play something like e6. You'll play bishop d6. Very normal moves. As you can see, there's not much to this. You don't need to know that much theory. However, I will show you some variations you should know. There are a few variations in this opening that are quite important. You can actually lose quite easily if you don't know them. For example, in this line, you may have noticed that the evaluation doesn't quite like it. It's at 0.41. Why? That's because best move in this position is d takes c5. But you won't see many people play it. It's not very common. Now, you may look at this and think, this knight is pinned. I can just take this, right? No, you can't. And I'm going to show you why. In fact, this is a massive, massive blunder. I'm going to give you a second to think. The reason why is knight takes e5. Brilliant move. This looks ridiculous. Your opponent is giving up a queen for free. But look at this diagonal. It is completely open. So the bishop can come in and give a check. The only way to stop this is by blocking. Your opponent can take the queen, have to move here, take this bishop. Your opponent is up 6 points of material. Do not fall into that trap. This happens quite often. A lot of people don't know about this. But again, why has it happened? You have just left your entire side here, this diagonal, exposed. Because this pawn is gone. This knight has moved. So this is one thing you need to be wary of. You cannot leave this diagonal fully open like this. If their bishop or their queen can just come in and give a check. That's not the only reason why this particular variation can be difficult. Let's say you just play e6. Your opponent defends that pawn. And you decide to just take the knight. Because your plan is to take the knight. Queen takes. And you play this. Why is this not good for you? Even though you have equal material. Because again, this diagonal, bishop b5. Now, yeah, you can block. And this position isn't terrible. But your opponent has lots of development while you only have this. Your opponent could castle. Your opponent could do a lot of things and put pressure on your king. It's just not a great position. So instead of going through that, let's play something else. We're just going to stop the bishop from coming here altogether. We are going to play a6. You need to know this. This is important. At the higher levels, people will play this variation. You are just stopping any shenanigans with the bishop coming down here. Now, there are still a few other moves. Some people may make a mistake. They want to protect this, so they play something like bishop d4. Now you can take this. You would play something like b6. This is just an example. This will most likely not happen. This is very rare. I'm just showing this to you so you know what to do. Other than d takes c5, what could your opponent play? They might play something like bishop e3. Your game plan is simple. You can now take if you want. I would play e6. They can still play this. This is still on the table. It's quite a similar position. But if they didn't play it first, they probably won't play it. Okay, let's go through our fundamentals again. Attack the center. If they advance, you will play this. If they take, you will attack. If this knight comes out, you will pin it. So simple. So simple. Maybe they don't take. Maybe they defend. If they defend, you do the same thing. They would play this, you pin it again. Maybe they defend like this, you take, they take, you attack. Now, there is more advanced prep for this, but this is all you need to know. One more thing, you may see this move. This is called the fantasy variation. The point of it is if you trade these pawns, white has these 2 pawns in the middle that are very good. Against the fantasy, you could go with this if you want. You would then have to play e5, and you would get into a game like this. But this is for you to learn by yourself. Okay, guys, I hope this video helped you a lot. See you next time.